Hello and welcome back, adventurers. It's been a while and I'm excited to be back as we got the news of a new book coming out in May. With 30 domains, both new and returning ones, and a lot of reimagining, I thought we could do one more dive into the original Barovia. So, let me tell you of 5 NPCs that you should absolutely add to your Curse of Strahd campaign. First, let me tell you of those who you might already have but just don't really know their backstory. In the years following Grand Conjunction, a new servant appeared in the employ of Barovia's Dark Lord. Blazing on the back of a dread nightmare, there emerged a peacekeeper in the domain. Known only as Sheriff von Zarovich, this Lord and Scourge has become Strahd's representative to many of Barovia's people. None save Strahd himself know of his origins, and that only adds to the terror of his image. The Sheriff features are usually hidden beneath a black helmet crafted to look like a gargoyle head complete with horns. Peering beneath the helmet are cold, icy blue eyes that reflect no humanity in their fearful gaze. When he does take his helmet off, the Sheriff's disfigured face usually scares all in the vicinity. He is scarred, rotted and twisted, his eyes are all that seem human. When the Sheriff speaks, his deep voice sounds hollow and devoid of emotion. Doesn't he remind you of someone? Maybe a particular shadow elf? Sheriff von Zarovich is the general of the Ebon Gargoyle, a secret police that roots out traitors, agents of the Aslin's Kargat, spies, and members of the Call of Morninglord who conspire against Strahd. Rumors persist that the Sheriff is raising a great undead and mercenary army to oppose the Kargat and descent upon Aslin before he can rebuild his empire to its full strength. Arcanaloths are scribes, librarians, and advocates of the Yugolovs, binding mortals and fiends alike into infernal contracts. For eons, Inajura fulfilled his duties, though petty rivalries and poor luck prevented his advantage in rank. His destiny changed when he ventured into the material plane to tempt Strahd von Zarovich. On the eve of a pivotal battle against the Turks in 347 BC, Inajura visited the still mortal Strahd and made a pact with the general, whose soul was already stained by the horrors of war. In return for his soul, Strahd bargained for victory on the field of battle. Strahd also convinced Inajura to allow him to take possession of the Fiend's Book of Keeping, until the contract was fulfilled by his own death. This unholy tome, a symbol of Inajura's status in the Yugolov society, contained all Inajura's contracts. When the mist snatched Strahd up, 4 years later, Inajura was left behind in material Barovia, shamed and seething with rage. For centuries, Inajura attempted to divine the fate of Strahd and the Book of Keeping. He could not return home without it. When the Lord of Barovia returned briefly during the Grand Conjunction, Arcanaloth seized the opportunity to reclaim his book and wreak revenge. But he failed, obviously due to the meddle of adventurers, as they destroyed his book for good. Now, Inajura despises his entrapment in the realm of dread. Since the Grand Conjunction, however, he has learned a great deal regarding his Misty Prison. He theorizes that the more powerful he becomes, the greater the possibility of escape. This fits nicely with his goal of filling the new Book of Keeping with signatures of the damned. This is why he can be found in the Amber Temple, learning and scheming. He can be a powerful ally against Strahd, but he is first and foremost a liar. He is also a cunning manipulator who paints himself in a meek and unfavorable manner, subtly suggesting that any mortal who deals with him has the upper hand. Actually, Inajura is capable of juggling hundreds of complex plots and is rarely caught off guard by mortals. The quest for eternal youth has driven many to deeds of great heroism and terrible despair. For some, it is a noble calling that leads to the discovery of great medical advances. For others, it is an obsession that leads to the most heinous of crimes. In the case of Jacqueline Montari, it has become the basis for a series of crimes as horrible and bizarre as any in Ravenloft's whole sordid history. Jacqueline was born in Barovia some 200 years ago. She grew up in the village of Kresk, learning the craft of thieving from her parents, and became one of the most skilled and beautiful rogues by the age of 18. But when she entered her late 20s, a horrible thought occurred to her. Her beauty wouldn't last forever. In an effort to preserve her looks, Jacqueline traveled to the Vistani compound on the banks of the river Ivlis. She sought out Madame Eva, the matriarch of Barovia's Vistani population, and begged for some means to remain eternally young and beautiful. At first, Madame Eva refused to help the rogue, but relented when threatened with a knife. Calmly, she told Jacqueline that there was a way to ensure her beauty would never fade, but she would be wiser not to seek it in the castle Ravenloft. Relieved but paranoid, Jacqueline killed Madame Eva to ensure that she wouldn't be betrayed and crept in the castle. Not fully comprehending the terrors that dwelt within the great stone structure, she prowled the library of Ravenloft. But before she could find anything, Strahd von Zarovich revealed himself, pulling the horrified young thief into his cold embrace. When Jacqueline awoke, she was caged in the village square as criminal. Mad with terror, she was dragged from her prison and beheaded before a grim crowd of villagers. As the silent citizens began to disperse, a representative of the Vistani stepped forward. She told the tale of Madame Eva's death and claimed the body of the young thief. For several days, the Vistani wove intricate magics over the corpse. Then, 1 week after she died, Jacqueline was restored to life. She awoke within the abandoned Varda near Kresk, dressed in the Vistani clothing, with a white band of red velvet secured around her neck. Glad to be alive, she hastened home to the village. It was only there, when she caught her reflection in a looking-glass, that Jacqueline comprehended her fate. The visage that looked back at her was that of a wizened Madame Eva. The horror of her punishment mounted beyond reason, however, when she tore away the ribbon encircling her neck and the Vistani had detached itself from her body. It is a tribute to the iron will of Jacqueline Montari that she did not lose her sanity then and there. She discovered that she could still function normally without a head, and that the ribbon served to secure the surrogate head in place. The thief sought out the Zarovich again in rage, but the Vistani laughed bitterly at her fate, revealing that should she find her original head, she would not only be freed of her curse, but would receive the gift of true eternal youth. Lisa von Zarovich was born in 525 Barovian calendar, daughter of Anna and Todd von Zarovich and the granddaughter of Strahd's younger brother Sturm, who was one of the few to escape Strahd's wrath on the day he murdered his brother Sergei and lost his beloved Tatiana. Lisa was raised to despise her granduncle as a traitor and monster, but that hatred prompted her to seek out death herself. Of her branch of the family, Lisa is the most capable. She is the only one who realizes that the age is the secret to vampire's power. To this end, she enticed the ghost of a former lover to age her when she became a vampire. Once Lisa had attained the age and power that satisfied her, she destroyed the ghost. Lisa's most recent plot against Strahd involved a conspiracy with the Illithits of Bloodsport to create vampiric mind flayers. She had an agreement that if she succeeded in creating such monstrosities, the Illithits would invade Barovia and destroy Strahd. However, the intervention of a heroic band of adventurers thwarted that attempt. Her own vanity and arrogance ultimately were her undoing, as she was poisoned by Strahd von Zarovich. When he learned of her plans to enslave a prominent young noble, he replaced him with a flesh golem, whose blood was laced with arcane potions, causing lethargy in vampires. In 750 Barovian calendar, Lisa slipped into a torpor and now finds that she can only awaken for 3 hours a night, though that span is slowly growing. Winters in Barovia are not pleasant things. Icy winds blow down from the peaks of Balanox, carrying heavy snows and bitter cold. But frostbite and avalanche are not the greatest dangers to be found on the slopes of Mount Baratok. For as the days grow short and the nights stretch out, the Ice Queen Jezra Wagner rises from her seasonal grave. Young Noble died at the age of 27, some 75 years after the domain of Barovia came into Ravenloft. It came as a great tragedy, as she was a kind and loving woman in such a dark and horrible land. Her life was claimed by an avalanche on the winter solstice when her friends and her climbed the slopes of Mount Baratok. But where her friends died from the fall, she was entombed alive in a cave and survived for days before succumbing to cold and starvation. However, this was not her end. She drew the attention of dark powers that brought her back as a forever freezing spirit. She believes herself to be cursed, not even realizing her undead nature, and robs the living of their warmth. Unfortunately, it is only a temporary reprieve for her. As her embrace kills those she steals the heat from, she cannot hold on to it for too long. Soon the biting ice comes back, and she clings to the living once more. Thank you so much for your time, patient listeners. I hope you enjoyed this little collection of damned individuals, and are prepared for more lore in the future. I'll see you all soon, and as always, be careful while crossing the mists.